The story begins with Felicia Earhart standing before her fiancé with a resolve that chills the air, her expression unyielding as she delivers a declaration that shatters the aristocratic composure of the room. She announces her intention to consult her father and the other family elders immediately to systematically dismantle the arrangement that binds them. With a gaze devoid of her usual warmth, she explicitly states her desire to cancel the engagement entirely. Cyrus, caught off guard by the sudden coldness radiating from the young lady who usually speaks so quietly, stammers in disbelief, his composure fracturing as he struggles to comprehend the termination of their union. 8 months prior to this fracture, the atmosphere at the Crane Academy in the Auckland Kingdom radiates with celebratory grandeur. Felicia stands on the stage of the auditorium, bathing in the accolades of the faculty for her outstanding performance at the poetry recital. The applause marks a high point in her academic life, coinciding with the achievements of Cyrus, who stands nearby in his uniform. Felicia approaches him with a gentle smile to offer her congratulations, to which Cyrus responds by praising her own victory, acknowledging the beauty of the poem she recited. He admits to a vulnerability rarely seen, confessing that his nervousness during the event reduced his memory of the triumph to a mere recollection of staring at the floor. Observers nearby marvel at the pair, cementing their reputation as a flawless couple. They view Cyrus as a prodigy of the sword, destined to shine in tournaments before royalty, while Felicia is hailed for her literary talent, with expectations that she will secure a rank in the Royal Poetry Anthology. The societal structure of the Academy reinforces this duality, as upperclassmen, gender segregation dictates their curriculum, with boys training in martial arts and strategy for the Royal Knights, and girls refining arts like sewing and poetry for the role of royal poets. Born to marquis families, their union appears perfect on paper, a match blessed by status and talent. Yet, beneath the surface of this idealized pairing, Felicia harbors a quiet dissonance, telling herself she should be happy despite the weight settling in her chest. This dissonance manifests physically in the form of Maisie Goddard, Felicia's cousin of the same age. Maisie perpetually hovers around the couple, offering apologetic whimpers about intruding on their dates while failing to actually leave. Cyrus, rather than establishing boundaries, dismisses the intrusion with a casual assurance that it is fine, validating Maisie's presence. The pattern repeats relentlessly. On what was scheduled to be their 11th private date, Maisie appears yet again, asking to join. Cyrus accepts without hesitation, leading to a carriage ride where the seating arrangement visually mocks Felicia's status. Maisie wedges herself directly in the middle, separating the engaged couple. Felicia observes this spatial usurpation with a weary resignation, noting that Maisie has successfully attached herself to every single outing they have attempted. During the ride, Cyrus directs his empathy toward the interloper, comforting Maisie about the hardships she endures. Maisie leverages her history of being bullied to elicit sympathy, claiming she simply finds joy in going out with people, expressing a hope that Cyrus will be pleased with her company. Felicia recognizes the script, noting internally that Maisie recited these exact lines during their previous encounter. The frustration of planning a proper romantic date only to have it commandeered simmers beneath Felicia's polite exterior. She attempts to diffuse the tension with light sarcasm, teasingly asking if Maisie intends to steal Cyrus away. The reaction from Cyrus is immediate and harsh, but not in the way Felicia anticipates. He recoils at the suggestion, his face darkening with disdain. He brutally disparages Maisie, labeling her as merely a baron's daughter and scoffing at the notion that he would ever look at such a plain girl. He compares the two women to night and day, dismissing Felicia's jest as an impossibility due to Maisie's inferior social and physical standing. While meant to reassure Felicia, the cruelty of his elitism strikes a discordant note, leaving Felicia stunned by his callousness rather than relieved. Later, during a tea gathering on the academy grounds, the dynamic persists. Maisie praises Felicia's recent award enthusiastically, and Cyrus echoes the sentiment, framing her success as an expectation of his fiancée. However, the conversation shifts as Maisie offers unsolicited critique, suggesting that a specific scream in Felicia's work on page 11 lacked the necessary impact and should have been phrased differently. Felicia accepts the critique with a strained smile, promising to keep it in mind. Internally, she attempts to rationalize her situation, convincing herself she is lucky to be engaged to a man who is young and handsome, contrasting her fate with other girls who are betrothed to much older men. She acknowledges the external validation of their match while confronting the internal reality that the relationship contains absolutely no love. The fragile peace fractures further when a small insect intrudes upon their picnic. Maisie reacts with a theatrical scream, prompting Cyrus to abandon his conversation and rush to her side, cooing comforts and offering her shelter. Felicia watches the display, the repetitive nature of these events solidifying her doubts. The trio's routine extends to weekends, which are invariably spent attending chapel to offer prayers. This religious observance has morphed into their standard date itinerary. Outside the church, they encounter Barney, an acquaintance. Cyrus immediately sours, launching into a tirade against the younger boy. He dismisses Barney's swordsmanship as mediocre and characterizes him as arrogant. Cyrus attributes Barney's confidence solely to his proximity to Prince Kevin, accusing him of bragging about the connection. Maisie joins the condemnation, claiming she is a fan of the prince and questioning Barney's status. Felicia, however, reaches a breaking point. Hearing Cyrus disparage Barney compels her to make a decision. She reflects on the known friendship between Barney and Prince Kevin, the second prince of the kingdom, acknowledging she hadn't realized the depth of their bond until now. Cyrus, continuing his lecture, forbids Felicia from attending Barney's upcoming party. He frames this restriction as a protective measure, citing Barney's character issues, and claiming his grumpy demeanor about parties makes him unsuitable company. Cyrus insists he speaks only out of care for Felicia, painting a picture of Barney as someone who hates being lectured by younger peers. Felicia pushes back, recounting that her father explicitly asked her to attend the party and stating she has known Barney for a long time. Maisie interjects with childish disapproval, puffing her cheeks and stating she wouldn't even speak to Barney, let alone attend his party. She accuses Felicia of being unreasonable and making her fiancé sad. Maisie escalates her rebuke, questioning if Felicia cares about Cyrus at all and demanding she show him more respect as his betrothed. Unshaken by the combined pressure, Felicia defends Barney's character. She describes him as cheerful and lively, asserting that she sees nothing wrong with him. She refuses to swallow second-hand rumors or cut ties without verifying the truth for herself. She declares her intention to believe only what she sees with her own eyes. At that precise moment, Prince Kevin descends the steps, overhearing the commotion. He asks if someone mentioned his name and notes the spat. Maisie reacts with a high-pitched squeal of excitement, while Felicia greets him formally. The prince walks past them, but not before directing a genuine smile specifically toward Felicia. This silent validation stuns her, reinforcing her intuition. Turning back to Cyrus, Felicia offers a compromise wrapped in a challenge. She admits the possibility that she could be wrong about people, citing her long history with Barney as the basis for her current stance. However, she demands that Cyrus promise to scold her as her fiancé only if she is proven wrong after the fact. The gravity of her request hangs in the air. Cyrus softens, apologizing for losing his temper. Felicia accepts the apology but notes internally that despite the truce, they remain emotional strangers. Cyrus attempts to bridge the gap, acknowledging their different values. He pledges that since they are destined to be husband and wife, he will try to meet her halfway, little by little. The moment approaches a semblance of genuine connection, a potential turning point for their relationship. However, the fragile progress is instantly obliterated. Maisie, lurking nearby, interrupts the tender atmosphere to ask if they are going on a date afterward. Without missing a beat, she asks to come along. Cyrus, defaulting to his ingrained habit, agrees immediately, telling her, "Of course you can." Felicia stares at them, the cycle of intrusion repeating instantly despite the just-spoken promises. The realization crystallizes that nothing will change, fueling the resolve that will lead her to the opening scene, the cancellation of the engagement. The domestic tranquility of the Earhart estate fractures under the shrill persistence of Maisie Goddard, who demands access to Barney's upcoming party. Felicia Earhart counters this request by reminding her cousin of her previous declarations against attending such social gatherings, exposing the contradiction in Maisie's sudden enthusiasm. This friction stems from a familial realignment. Maisie entered Felicia's life only recently, following the remarriage of Felicia's uncle. A retrospective view of their introduction reveals the calculated nature of Maisie's integration. Marquis Nicholas Earhart, Felicia's father, formally presents Maisie to his daughters, Felicia and Rosemary, instructing them to treat her as kin. Maisie immediately breaches social protocol, lunging forward to embrace Felicia with a casual familiarity that defies the rigid class structures of their society. The societal hierarchy places a formidable barrier between them. Felicia stands as the daughter of a marquis, a high-ranking noble, while Maisie is merely the daughter of a baron, a rank situated near the bottom of the aristocracy. When Felicia's father reprimands Maisie for this breach of etiquette, Maisie weaponizes her lower status, shedding tears and claiming she only wished to be friends, effectively casting herself as the victim of aristocratic snobbery. Back in the present, Maisie employs this same emotional manipulation, dismissing Felicia's valid concerns as silly fussing while maintaining a facade of innocence. Felicia observes this performance with internal exhaustion, noting that Maisie has already begged 3 times to attend, blatantly contradicting her own stated distaste for parties involving Cyrus. Maisie clasps her hands together, pleading with an intensity that borders on theatrical, claiming that her attendance is somehow tied to her father's work and therefore impossible to avoid. Felicia retreats into a sigh, mentally noting that if their roles were reversed, she would never intrude so shamelessly. She confronts the reality that Maisie now lingers in her home every single day, treating the Earhart estate as her own. The atmosphere shifts with the arrival of a maid announcing Sir Cyrus. Felicia rushes to the parlor, but her fiancé bypasses her completely, offering only a cursory acknowledgement before stating his intent to speak with Marquis Earhart. Felicia stands marginalized in her own home, realizing with a pang of bitterness that Cyrus visits her father more frequently than he takes her on dates. She attempts to eavesdrop at the door, but Cyrus catches her and snaps, ordering her to stop butting into matters she does not understand. When he sees her shock, he backpedals, claiming his harshness was merely a joke. The parlor soon hosts an even more insulting dynamic. Maisie has inserted herself into the room, lamenting to Cyrus that she feels like a stranger in her own home and has nowhere else to go. Cyrus, displaying a profound lack of awareness, asks Maisie if she plans to go out with Toby and the others the following day. Felicia watches this exchange with growing ire, aware that the household staff has begun to mistake Maisie's constant presence for a sign that she is the one Cyrus promises things to. Cyrus then pivots the conversation to Felicia, confirming her attendance at Barney's party. He uses her scheduled absence as a pretext to organize a separate social gathering, suggesting that he, Maisie, Toby, and Neil throw their own party to avoid loneliness. Maisie accepts with jubilant enthusiasm, her earlier claims of having nowhere to go vanishing instantly. Cyrus justifies this exclusion by framing it as a kindness to Maisie on a day off, completely disregarding the optics of planning a private event with his fiancé's cousin while his fiancé is elsewhere. Felicia, recognizing that objecting would paint her as narrow-minded, decides to simply endure the slight and attend Barney's party alone. The scene transitions to the Ashfield estate the following day, where Marquis Nicholas Earhart greets Edgar, the host. Edgar expresses gratitude for their attendance but voices a candid disappointment, admitting he had hoped Felicia would marry his own son rather than Cyrus. He alludes to the fact that Cyrus is marrying into the Earhart family as a son-in-law, a position that implies a complex power dynamic. Barney, the subject of Edgar's matchmaking hopes, approaches Felicia with a cheerful demeanor, congratulating her on the engagement. He immediately notes the glare he receives from Felicia's camp, attributing it to his blunt comment about Cyrus becoming a son-in-law. Barney pivots to flattery, revealing that Felicia has garnered a significant fan base, not for her social standing, but for her poetry. He playfully bumps her shoulder, accusing her of modesty when she feigns surprise. The casual atmosphere shatters with the arrival of Prince Kevin. The crowd erupts into whispers as the royal figure approaches Felicia, recognizing her from their previous encounter at the chapel. Kevin speaks with disarming sincerity, revealing that he read her work in the Royal Poetry Anthology the previous year and has been curious about her ever since. He expresses a regret that they did not meet sooner and asks her to drop the formal titles, requesting she treat him as casually as she treats Barney. Barney interrupts this intimate moment, reminding the prince that Felicia is already engaged. Kevin accepts this boundary with a laugh but clarifies his intent. He wishes to be her friend and supports her as a fan of her literature. Barney teases Felicia, noting her flushed face and accusing her of cheating with her reactions. Felicia stammers, overwhelmed by the revelation that Prince Kevin, her idol, is a fan of her work. She confesses to Barney that she has admired Kevin since watching him in the royal tournament 2 years prior. This confession leads to a discussion of a controversial match between Kevin and a fighter named Adrian. Barney recalls that Kevin lost because he hesitated to attack when Adrian's shield dropped. Public opinion attributed this hesitation to his royal status, assuming he lacked the killer instinct of a true warrior. However, Felicia offers a different interpretation. She asserts that Kevin refrained from attacking not out of weakness, but because he recognized the shield drop was a maintenance error rather than a combat mistake. She argues that if he were not a prince, He would have struck without hesitation, but his choice to spare a defenseless opponent defined his integrity. She contrasts this with Cyrus, noting that her fiancé would have attacked immediately, viewing the equipment failure as the fighter's responsibility. Kevin, who has overheard this defense, looks at Felicia with profound appreciation, validating that she sees him exactly as he is. He dispatches Barney to fetch drinks, creating a moment of privacy at the estate's gazebo. Once alone, Kevin addresses the incident at the chapel where Felicia was cornered by 4 men. He apologizes for not intervening, admitting he felt disgraceful for watching her face such odds alone. Felicia confesses that despite her outward bravery, her legs were trembling with fear. To honor her spirit, Kevin presents a rectangular gift box wrapped in elegant paper. Inside lies a high-quality fountain pen, a tool intended to encourage her to continue writing the works he so admires. He explains the symbolism of the wrapping paper, which features the Edelweiss flower. He tells her that the flower represents courage, a talisman to keep her legs from trembling in the future. He pledges his support as her friend and ally, solidifying a bond based on mutual respect. Felicia accepts the gift with overwhelming gratitude, thanking him for the dazzle he has brought into her life. When Barney returns, he finds Felicia beaming, holding the gift box. She excitedly shows him the Edelweiss motif. Barney's expression freezes as he recognizes the flower. He recalls a piece of cultural knowledge Felicia seemingly lacks. In a foreign country, when a man gifts a woman Edelweiss, it carries a specific, romantic implication. Barney looks at the unsuspecting Felicia and the retreating prince, realizing the weight of the message that was just delivered. He decides to keep this knowledge to himself, muttering that some things are better left unsaid to preserve the innocent friendship Felicia believes she has just forged. The imposing facade of the Crane Academy main building stood as a bastion of learning, its many windows reflecting the daylight as the students inside awaited the day's judgment. Inside the classroom, the tension broke with the instructor's announcement of the top poem in the class. The name called was Maisie, and as the congratulations washed over her, a distinct, smug expression settled upon her features. Nearby, Felicia froze, her eyes widening in sheer disbelief as she processed the victory of her rival, a reaction mirrored by the stunned silence of her peers. Discussions erupted immediately among the students, dissecting the merits of the winning piece. One student sought validation, insisting that Maisie's poem was genuinely good this time, while others compared it to the consistently lovely works of Rachel and Felicia. However, a consensus formed regarding a jarring discrepancy within the work. While the opening lines drew the readers in with a melancholy beauty, the second half baffled them. The students rationalized the drop in quality, speculating that Maisie must have simply been off her game as she wrote the conclusion. Rachel and her friend huddled over the manuscript, analyzing the specific stanza that garnered such praise. The opening lines painted a vivid, serene picture. The world stays the same, birds whisper, morning dew sparkles, lighting up my darkness. Rachel nodded in agreement, acknowledging the brilliance of this initial segment. However, as their eyes drifted downward, the quality plummeted into incoherence. The beautiful imagery dissolved into a mess of barely readable scrawl and nonsensical phrases, culminating in the baffling line, "Tears moisten extreme." The sheer drop in literary value left the girls stunned, questioning how such a disjointed creation defeated Felicia's work. Standing in the background, Felicia clenched her fists, her shadow stretching across the floor as she agonized over where she had gone wrong to lose against such a chaotic composition. The conversation shifted to the complex family dynamics surrounding Felicia and the victor. A classmate noted that despite the lack of a blood relation, the term "blood runs true" seemed applicable, sparking a discussion about their lineage. A detailed mental map of the family tree clarified the connections. Nicholas and Christina produced Felicia and Rosemary, while Baron Goddard and Lady Daphne produced Maisie. The only true blood-related cousin in the equation was Agnes, the daughter of Baron Goddard and his previous wife. This intricate web of remarriages and stepsisters placed Felicia and Maisie in proximity without sharing genetics, a fact Felicia rarely bothered to articulate as she felt it hardly mattered to her daily life. Determined to understand the source of Maisie's sudden poetic flair, Rachel confronted her directly. She demanded to know if Maisie had used any references for the opening scene, imploring her to explain how she crafted such a beautiful passage. Maisie, looking away with a feigned air of nonchalance, deflected the inquiry, claiming she simply didn't know and had perhaps forgotten the inspiration entirely. Rachel, undeterred by the evasion, declared her ambitious new goal. She aimed to win the grand prize in the Royal Poetry Collection. She expressed a fervent desire to study anything of quality to improve her craft, even if just a little. Maisie, maintaining her outward charm, encouraged Rachel, assuring her that her poems were capable of securing a victory. Turning her attention to Felicia, Rachel extended the invitation to compete, suggesting that Felicia, too, should aim for the grand prize given the loveliness of her work. Felicia accepted the compliment with a flushed, hesitant gratitude. The Royal Poetry Collection stood as a pillar of literary prestige, a volume published twice a year that compiled excellent poems from across the kingdom. It was widely whispered that securing the grand prize in this collection served as the fastest path to becoming a royal poet. Felicia harbored a secret desire for this accolade, her heart yearning for the prize. However, the recent defeat weighed heavily on her. After losing to Maisie's disjointed poem, voicing such a lofty ambition felt presumptuous. She rationalized her feelings, admitting that while she didn't strictly aim for a court position, the encouragement of others made the goal feel desirable. Later, in the privacy of their residence, Felicia and Rachel continued their discussion. Rachel praised Felicia's abilities, but Felicia deflected, stating she lacked the confidence to pursue the grand prize seriously. Seeking to lift spirits and foster improvement, Rachel proposed a plan. At the upcoming tea party the day after next, they would all exchange poems. The idea sparked joy, promising a fun and constructive gathering. Suddenly, Maisie appeared, her voice cutting through their planning session. She feigned ignorance, claiming she had just happened to be listening in, and immediately requested to join the tea party. The sudden intrusion caught the group off guard. One of the girls attempted to politely decline, explaining that the number of attendees had been set long ago and it would be difficult to accommodate an extra person so late. Maisie's expression shifted instantly from cheerful to pitiful. Resorting to emotional manipulation, tears welled in Maisie's eyes as she begged not to be left out. She offered to stand at the edge of the gathering if necessary, her sniffles echoing in the hallway. The guilt trip proved effective. Rachel, unable to withstand the sight of crying, capitulated. She promised to ask the maids to add one more place setting, pleading with Maisie to stop crying. Maisie's demeanor instantly brightened, confirming the success of her tactic. Felicia observed this exchange with a critical eye, noting that while Maisie wasn't annoying enough to be labeled a nuisance, she possessed a subtly pushy nature that often bulldozed boundaries. Maisie celebrated her inclusion, expressing delight at hanging out with friends and reading their poems, while Felicia's mind drifted to past offenses. She recalled a specific date with her fiancé, Cyrus, following the Ashfield estate party. Even on a private gondola ride, intended for just the couple, Maisie had tagged along as usual. In the memory, Felicia sat beside Cyrus, her expression guarded, as Maisie cheerfully noted they were riding the same gondola as last time. This remark triggered a realization in Felicia. She recalled that after the previous week's party, Toby and others had come to this same spot with Maisie. Cyrus, seemingly indifferent to the implications, had dismissed the intrusion, claiming he didn't mind, but for Felicia, this recurring pattern of a third wheel was a source of constant, silent trouble. Back in the present, whispers from other students reached Felicia's ears. They critiqued Maisie's forward behavior, noting how inappropriate it was for a baron's daughter. They drew comparisons between the two, praising Felicia for being smart and distinct from her stepsister. Felicia tried to focus on a joke Neil had made about Toby to distract herself, but the gossip grated on her. Internally, Felicia reached a breaking point. She resented the way the observers silently blamed Cyrus for the awkward dynamics while she was expected to maintain a facade of composure. The injustice of it stung. Cyrus and Maisie had gone on a date without his fiancée, yet Felicia was the one enduring the social commentary. She refused to dismiss her feelings as petty jealousy. The reality that they chatted about the affair while ignoring her, expecting her to simply smile through the humiliation, fueled a quiet rage. Rachel interrupted Felicia's brooding, reiterating her belief that together they could aim for the grand prize. Felicia, overwhelmed by the convergence of academic failure and romantic insecurity, politely excused herself. She claimed an inability to focus and decided to go home early, leaving Rachel concerned. Walking alone, the dark thoughts swirled in Felicia's mind. When she considered the dynamic between Cyrus and Maisie, doubt cast a long shadow over her impending marriage. Despite the happiness of those around her and Cyrus's agreement to the union, she could not summon joy. Cyrus's tendency to look down on people, combined with Maisie's persistent behavior, created a suffocating environment. Felicia's thoughts returned to poetry, the one realm where she sought solace. She acknowledged Rachel's incredible talent and the weight of her belief. However, the sting of her poem not being chosen lingered. She recalled a pivotal moment when His Highness had declared himself a fan of her work. Prior to that, she had never considered writing for recognition. Poetry had simply been a part of her everyday life. The frustration bubbled over as she recited lines from the winning poem, Boom! A burning manly heart, even a dense girl gained a friend of the heart. The rudimentary rhymes and clumsy phrasing infuriated her. Losing to such a composition felt like an insult to the art form. She conceded that Maisie's opening was beautiful, but the disparity between the start and the finish haunted her. As she stewed in her sadness, a knock at the door interrupted her spiral. Prince Kevin entered the room. In her distracted state, Felicia admonished him for using his title, only to realize her slip. Kevin laughed off the formality, explaining he had a quick meeting nearby about a ceremony and decided to visit. He inquired why she was at the academy instead of home. Kevin, ever observant, noted her despondent mood and asked if she was okay. He questioned if something specific had happened, his intuition cutting through her defenses. Felicia, touched by his kindness as a friend, hesitated before admitting the truth. She confessed that she had performed poorly in poetry class and had been feeling down since. Kevin, displaying a gentle interest, asked if he could see the poem in question. Kevin took the sheet of paper, standing by the window where the light was best. Tension filled the room as he read. Felicia watched him nervously, dreading his assessment but needing his honest opinion. After a moment of silence, he thanked her for showing it to him. His critique was direct. He told her that the poem did not feel like her. It came across as ordinary and stiff. He apologized for his bluntness, aware that such honesty could be embarrassing. Felicia absorbed the words, the truth of them settling in. Kevin continued, elaborating on his perspective. He explained that he had read several of her poems and stories, and he was a fan precisely because of her unique voice. He asked if she had perhaps tried to mimic the style of the previous year's Royal Collection winners simply because he had mentioned liking it. He questioned if she had lost her own style in the process. He stepped closer, holding the manuscript. He reminded her that her poems usually possessed a kindness toward others and a gentle gaze, qualities that were absent in this piece. The realization hit Felicia with the force of a physical blow. She admitted to herself that she had gotten carried away by his praise, writing not what she wanted, but what she thought would please him. She questioned what she had been doing with her art. Tears gathered in her eyes as she confessed her motivations. She wanted to write something beautiful using the pen he had given her, but her intent had been corrupted by a desire to flatter. She felt pathetic for sulking over losing to Maisie when her own work lacked integrity. Kevin listened patiently, expressing relief that she had cleared her head and understood the root of the issue. Having delivered his guidance, Kevin prepared to leave. He thanked her for her wonderful poems and promised to always cheer for her as a friend. Felicia, her spirit bolstered by his support, affirmed his words. Before departing completely, Kevin paused and turned back. He suggested that someday she might even win the grand prize. Felicia reacted with shock, reminding him that she had only received an honorable mention the previous year. Kevin's belief in her remained unshaken. Felicia internalized his encouragement, realizing that he truly believed she was capable of achieving the highest honor. The knowledge that he believed in her ignited a spark of determination within her. She vowed to try her best. As he walked away, Felicia watched him, her heart swelling with a renewed sense of purpose and affection. The lesson resonated deeply. If she believed in herself as he did, her dreams would surely come true. The afternoon sun filtered through the high windows of the estate, illuminating a gathering defined by elegance, porcelain, and the rustling of paper. The group of young noblewomen had convened for their promised tea party, a social ritual centered on the exchange of poetry. By Rachel's suggestion, they had adopted a game of anonymity, writing poems, swapping them randomly, and deducing the author based on style and content. The atmosphere carried a veneer of Brittany cute, with flowers dancing and smiles filling the air, a sentiment the group quickly attributed to Brittany herself. However, the tranquility fractured as the next poem was read aloud. The verses spoke of a summer at the sea, but the imagery clashed violently with the romantic setting. Instead of serenity, the poem described fighting and quarreling, the tactile discomfort of sand sticking to skin, and a narrator becoming visibly irritated by the blazing sun. The jarring juxtaposition of a lover's arrival with the narrator's annoyance led the group to a unanimous and immediate conclusion: this was Maisie's work. Maisie, rather than shrinking from the critique, preened with a smug sense of accomplishment. She interpreted their swift identification of her work not as a commentary on its chaotic nature, but as proof that her style was overflowing with originality. She beamed, exclaiming her happiness that the description of a lover arriving was considered lovely, completely bypassing the confusion her poem had generated. She admitted to wanting everyone to write better poems, positioning herself as a benevolent, if eccentric, critic. The mood shifted again as the next piece commanded the room's attention. This poem possessed an overwhelming imagery that pulled the listeners directly into its world, the vivid descriptions nearly moving one student to tears. It was sad, beautiful, and undeniably the work of Rachel. The group showered her with praise, acknowledging her as a literary powerhouse. Yet, amidst the acclaim, Maisie offered a sharp, technical critique. She argued that while the poem struck right in the chest, the love scene in the middle lacked passion. Rachel adjusted her glasses, accepting the criticism with a stoic grace. She confessed that her father was still arranging her marriage and that she had never experienced love. Consequently, her love poems were constructed entirely from imagination and borrowed words. She reasoned that even if she were to fall in love, she would be forced to abandon those feelings once a fiancé was selected, leading her to suppress the very concept of romance. The conversation naturally pivoted to Felicia. The other girls extolled her love scenes as the superior standard, specifically citing a moment where an actress heroine drew courage from her lover. They turned their gaze upon Felicia, attributing the sparkling quality of her poetry to her real-life romance with her handsome fiancé, Cyrus. Felicia sat frozen, a forced smile masking her internal recoil. The group's assumption, that her passion flowed from Cyrus, could not have been further from the truth. In the privacy of her thoughts, she acknowledged that the sparkle in her work was born from the encouragement of Prince Kevin regarding the Royal Poetry Anthology, not her engagement. The reality of her relationship with Cyrus was cold and stagnant. Whenever he visited, he bypassed her entirely to speak with her father. She felt the weight of a relationship that was going nowhere, contrasting sharply with the lovey-dovey image her friends projected onto her. As the tea party wound down, the conversation drifted to local gossip. Maisie enthusiastically recommended a new cafe in the Noble District called Pumpkin Hat, claiming the sign had caught her eye. She basked in the admiration of her peers, wearing a triumphant "Doya" expression as they praised her knack for spotting quality shops. Felicia observed this performance with a simmering, silent resentment. She recognized the shop immediately because she was the one who had originally found it. This pattern repeated constantly. Maisie would present plays, books, and shops to the group as her own discoveries, despite having received the information secondhand from Felicia. Maisie never credited Felicia, erasing her contribution entirely. Felicia chided herself for being petty over such a trivial matter, yet the consistent lack of acknowledgement gnawed at her peace. The duality of her existence pressed upon her. Felicia felt torn between the political necessity of her engagement to the Earhart family and the personal promise she had made to Kevin. She questioned if she was being greedy by chasing two rabbits, seeking success in both her duty and her passion. Resolving to prioritize her art, she decided to retreat to the library, determined to challenge the Royal Poetry Anthology with a poem containing all her strength. The following morning, the library offered a quiet sanctuary. Felicia discovered Rachel already there, seated amidst stacks of references but struggling to write. Felicia explained that the abundance of reference materials in the library made it easier for her to focus, a contrast to Rachel's writer's block. Rachel, observing Felicia, dismantled the latter's insecurities with surgical precision. She noted that Felicia had considered abandoning love to focus solely on poetry, a luxury Rachel claimed to possess but Felicia did not. Rachel argued that Felicia could not simply ignore her engagement and family matters. They were integral to who she was. It was precisely because Felicia was not like Rachel, because she carried the burden of balancing these conflicting worlds, that she was able to write such beautiful love scenes. The realization struck Felicia. Rachel continued, declaring Felicia the most talented student in the academy and expressing deep respect for how seriously she faced the art form. Rachel apologized for her previous dismissal, admitting she had been happy when Felicia suggested aiming for the grand prize together, but her own depression had silenced her response at the time. Emboldened by this validation, Felicia revealed the source of her drive. She had made a promise to someone to win the prize. Rachel accepted this confession with a smile, officially declaring them rivals. She vowed to aim for the grand prize as well, asserting that she would write a poem that would not lose to anyone, not even Felicia. The two girls, having acknowledged each other's strength, sat side by side at the library table. Rachel teased that she wouldn't plagiarize, but she intended to spy on the enemy. As their pens scratched against the paper, the tension of competition transformed into a mutual force of elevation, two artists pushing one another toward the summit of the royal poetry anthology. The garden provided a quiet backdrop for the shifting dynamics between Felicia and her fiancé. Felicia requested a shift in address, asking him to call her Cyrus rather than a formal title, to which he agreed, cementing the verbal reality of their engagement. Cyrus flattered her, claiming he must be the luckiest man alive to have someone like her as his wife, though Felicia's internal monologue revealed a disconnect. She recalled gossip expressing disbelief that Cyrus had agreed to become a son-in-law, and she noted they had never shared a proper date. The narrative shifted to a confrontation within the Earhart estate. Felicia interrupted a meeting between her father and Cyrus, her eyes locking onto loan documents bearing the name of the Hamer family. She demanded to know why her father was loaning them money, piercing the veil of their engagement. Her father attempted to bifurcate the issues, insisting that bringing Cyrus into the family and aiding the Hamers were separate matters, urging Felicia not to worry. However, the reality of their courtship contradicted this reassurance. On a day designated for a date, Maisie walked alongside them, a persistent third wheel that Cyrus ignored while he zoned out. Felicia, pushed to her limit by the intrusion, whispered a confrontation to Cyrus, questioning why he always invited Maisie. She noted internally that Maisie always volunteered, and Cyrus simply never refused, leaving Felicia to wonder why she had to endure her cousin's presence on a romantic outing. Felicia finally drew a line. She asked Maisie to sit this one out, expressing a desire to treasure a date with just the two of them so they could understand each other. Maisie immediately weaponized her tears, claiming she only wanted to spend time with friends because she never had them before. Cyrus instinctively sided with the tears, admonishing Felicia for being petty and sending a friend home out of jealousy. He invited Maisie to continue with them, nullifying Felicia's attempt at boundaries. They arrived at the cafe, Pumpkin Hat, where Maisie presented the location with a flourish, claiming she wanted to show them a nice shop. Felicia seethed silently, recognizing the shop as her own discovery that Maisie had appropriated as her own favorite. Cyrus praised Maisie's taste, completely oblivious to the theft of credit. As they settled, Cyrus dismissed Felicia's earlier concerns about the intrusion, telling her not to be swayed by such things. He then immediately pivoted to his true objective. He requested to visit her house afterward to speak with Marky Earhart. When Felicia questioned the suddenness, he vaguely cited support and such, mirroring her father's earlier deflection about the loan. The truth crystallized in Felicia's mind. The Earhart family needed a son-in-law, and the Hamer family faced a debt crisis so severe they had to send 2 of their 3 sons away into marriages. Cyrus was marrying into her family not out of affection, but because the Hamers had given in to secure financial support. Felicia realized that her fiancé viewed her family as a bank, explaining why he tolerated Maisie and occasionally stung Felicia with his words. Despite this, she resolved to fulfill her duty and not get upset over every little thing. At the academy, whispers followed Felicia, attributing her position solely to fortune. She channeled the frustration into a rival spark, determining to use the jealousy and experience to add depth to her love poetry and aim for the grand prize. The atmosphere at school shifted with the arrival of Prince Kevin at the training grounds for a match against Professor Douglas. Kevin struggled under the professor's blade, his movements noted as slower than usual by the spectators. Professor Douglas reprimanded him, stating that just being protected isn't enough, and that Kevin was the second royal to ask for retraining. Kevin declared his resolve to protect his people as royalty so they could live free and safe, a sentiment that captivated the female students. Douglas acknowledged the resolve but demanded victory first. Kevin rallied and defeated the instructor. As the crowd cheered, Kevin cast a glance toward Felicia, which her friend interpreted as a personal gesture. Inspired by his dedication to his duty, Felicia vowed to give her all to both her engagement and the grand prize. Felicia poured her respect for Kevin and her own complex feelings into a new poem. The verses described a fairy with silver wings whispering to a character named Lily. The central theme revolved around sacrifice. I cannot give both freedom and peace. Choose one, and you lose the other. The narrative within the poem involved a heroine accepting her weakness, parting with the fairy, and disguising herself as a man to take her father's place in the army. Satisfied but wanting to polish the work before the December 31st deadline, Felicia visited the faculty office. The professor encouraged her, noting her recent struggles and hard work. Felicia walked back through the halls, mentally balancing her supports, her poetry, her engagement, and Kevin. She resolved to create a masterpiece to stand tall before the prince. Upon returning to her desk, Felicia found her privacy shattered. Maisie stood there, reading the draft of the poem without permission. Felicia's face flushed with heat and anger as she demanded Maisie stop. Maisie feigned innocence, claiming she only wanted to give advice because she saw how hard Felicia was working. Felicia shut her down cold. She declared she was aiming for the prize with this poem and did not need advice, explicitly stating she did not want Maisie to see it. Maisie pivoted instantly, adopting a competitive persona. She claimed to understand and declared she would view Felicia as a rival, promising not to lose either. Felicia forced herself to endure the interaction, telling herself it would be unseemly to get worked up. She accepted Maisie's promise to keep the poem a secret. However, internally, the dam broke. Felicia lamented that having family like this was the worst. The narrator revealed that this moment marked the snapping point, the thread of small endurances Felicia had been holding onto finally severed. Sunlight streams through the tall windows of the bedchamber, illuminating the delicate features of Felicia as she stirs from her slumber. Her maid, Carla, stands by the drapes she has just pulled back, offering a polite greeting and commenting on the loveliness of the morning. Felicia rises, bringing a hand to her cheek, her expression serene and revitalized. She notes internally that waking up after completing a literary masterpiece leaves one feeling exceptionally refreshed. The scene shifts to the bustling common room of the academy, where a group of young noblewomen gathers, their attention fixed on a newspaper. Excitement ripples through the group as they discuss the Grain Times, specifically the Poem of the Month section where a familiar name has appeared. One girl exclaims that Maisie's poem has received an honorable mention, sparking curiosity about the content of the verse. Another student remarks to Felicia, who has just arrived, that Maisie's work has become the talk of the morning. Felicia acknowledges the greeting, her interest piqued. Rachel enters the fray, holding the newspaper aloft with a sense of purpose, remarking that she anticipated the buzz and brought the proof. While one student dismisses the general quality of poems in this particular paper as low-level, the group's enthusiasm remains undampened. They crowd together, eager to read the entry, chanting for the reading to commence. The newspaper spreads out before them, though the text appears dense and somewhat indecipherable to the casual glance. Amidst the huddle, Maisie accepts the physical affection of her peers, who squeeze her in congratulation. She feigns modesty, apologizing with a playful demeanor while basking in the attention. She coyly suggests that not just anyone gets selected, though she quickly qualifies that the top prize is a different caliber of achievement entirely, fishing for further validation. Internally, however, Felicia observes the scene with a competitive spark. Knowing Maisie is working hard on poetry means Felicia cannot afford to fall behind in her own artistic pursuits. Rachel, however, scans the printed words with a critical eye. While others offer generic praise about how blood tells and express jealousy, Rachel's expression stiffens. She notes that while the opening is awkward, there is a certain quality to it, but her brow furrows as she processes the text further. She questions the impossibility of what she is seeing. Turning to Maisie, Rachel interrogates her, asking if she isn't aiming to be a royal court poet, implying that the work doesn't match the ambition or the expected skill level. Rachel bluntly states that while Felicia might possess such skill, Maisie does not. The atmosphere grows tense as Rachel continues to decipher the poem, the visual representation of the text blurring into garbled nonsense to the reader but seemingly clear to the characters. Suddenly, Rachel shouts Maisie's name, her voice laced with accusation. Maisie attempts to play the innocent, asking what is wrong, but Rachel demands she stop playing dumb. Rachel stomps her foot, demanding an explanation for what the poem is supposed to be. The confrontation escalates. Rachel accuses Maisie of copying a story Rachel wrote and converting it into this poem. She points to the wording in the third stanza, claiming it is exactly like a poem she presented in class when she was chosen. Rachel argues that it isn't just a resemblance. The way the protagonist's feelings are depicted mirrors her own work too closely to be a coincidence. She reminds Maisie that she was present in class to hear the original poem, dismantling the defense of accidental similarity. In a split second of revealed malice, Maisie clicks her tongue, the sound sharp and dismissive. However, the moment she is challenged by the other girls asking who made that noise, Maisie instantly reverts to a trembling victim. She looks around nervously, asking who spoke, feigning ignorance. The other girls, swayed by Maisie's performance, suggest Rachel is being paranoid. Maisie, now emboldened by the group's support, suggests that perhaps she was merely influenced by something, noting that such things happen to everyone. Rachel recoils, insulted by the insinuation that this is merely referencing. She insists this is imitation, not influence. Maisie begins to cry, and the social tide turns against Rachel. The other girls comfort the sobbing Maisie, criticizing Rachel for being too harsh. Overwhelmed and isolated, Rachel tears up, feeling the injustice of the situation. She declares she will go explain the truth to the teacher, asserting that she didn't write her poem just for it to be stolen, before fleeing the room. With Rachel gone, the group turns their sympathies entirely to Maisie. Felicia approaches, urging Maisie not to cry and complimenting the poem as lovely. To distract her, Felicia begins to analyze the narrative within the verse. It tells the story of a girl named Daisy who dresses as a man to go to the battlefield in place of her injured father. As Felicia recites the lines, the imagery becomes vivid. A golden-winged, shining fairy whispers in Daisy's ear, offering a stark ultimatum. She cannot have both freedom and stability. The fairy warns that choosing one means losing the other, and that she cannot have everything. As Felicia reads the segment where Daisy parts ways with the fairy and admits her own weakness, a cold realization strikes her. The text before Felicia's eyes ceases to be a stranger's work. She recognizes the phrasing, the specific articulation of human frailty. It is identical to her own poetry. The realization makes her skin crawl. Maisie, drying her tears, admits to using Felicia's poem as a bit of reference as well. The word reference hangs in the air, heavy with deceit. Maisie launches into a defense, arguing that nobody writes without influence and that everyone creates while referencing existing works. Felicia listens, noting that while the argument follows a certain logic, it leaves her with a helpless, hollow feeling. Felicia reflects internally on the nature of writing. She acknowledges that while no one writes in a vacuum, she has never simply rewritten someone else's poem. She thinks of how she weaves words she knows, crafting expressions to convey the beauty she discovers in the world, feelings that belong to no one, yet the expression of them is personal. Felicia struggles with the concept that taking the beauty someone else felt and claiming it as one's own can be justified. She understands that the person who has been stolen from knows the truth, even if others dismiss it as paranoia. Maisie understands this logic yet weaponizes it. Felicia realizes with horror that because Maisie has published this stolen patchwork, Felicia can no longer submit her own, promised poem anywhere, as it will now appear that she is the plagiarist. Later, in the privacy of her own home, Felicia sits under the glow of a chandelier, unable to focus, her mind muddled by the day's events. Cyrus enters, noticing her distress immediately. He teases gently, asking if he has come to ask her father for support again, but observing her silence, he wonders if she will understand the turmoil in his heart. Felicia decides to voice her anxiety, revealing that the source of her trouble is Maisie. Cyrus asks if Maisie has done something again, prompting Felicia to hesitate. She brings up the fact that Maisie frequently tags along on their dates, suggesting that perhaps Cyrus hasn't been happy about it either. Cyrus admits that while it is true, the negative bias makes it hard to talk about. Felicia realizes that her frustration has been building up for a long time, far more than she realized. The dam breaks within Felicia's mind. She admits to herself that she hates Maisie, hates the brazen pushiness disguised as modesty and the shamelessness of stealing from others. She confesses to Cyrus that Maisie stole her poem, explaining that the submitted work contains scenes and wording identical to her own. She expects outrage or support. Instead, Cyrus's reaction is lukewarm. He acknowledges the statement with a simple, "I see," but then dismisses it, saying, "Nah, it's fine." Felicia is stunned. Cyrus explains that because Maisie has been with them since their first date, he has gotten to know her pretty well. He reasons that since Maisie is Felicia's cousin, she is practically his family too, and there is no harm in staying friendly. Felicia recalls that Cyrus never seemed bothered by Maisie's intrusion. While surprised at first, he accepted it as normal. He tells Felicia that she can keep her distance if she wishes, agreeing that it might be best for her, but he explicitly states that he intends to keep getting along with Maisie. The scene ends with Felicia feeling utterly cornered. She watches Cyrus smile, a look of satisfaction on his face that she cannot comprehend. The weight on her chest grows heavier, making it difficult to breathe, as she realizes her isolation is now complete. The morning sun filtered through the heavy curtains, yet it failed to pierce the gloom settling over Lady Felicia's chambers. Her maid, Carla, observed her mistress with a furrowed brow, sensing the weight hidden behind the young noblewoman's polite dismissal of concern. Felicia sat on the edge of her bed, her posture slumped and her gaze cast downward, a heavy sigh escaping her lips as the brightness of the day only served to deepen her internal shadow. Upon arriving at the academy, Felicia attempted to maintain her composure, greeting her peers with a practiced smile. However, the facade crumbled under the scrutiny of her friend Rachel, who immediately noted the swollen, red-rimmed state of Felicia's eyes behind her spectacles. The group gathered in the hallway, their expressions shifting from pleasantry to concern as they probed the source of her distress. They speculated about a fight, but the truth was far more insidious. Felicia revealed that yesterday, Maisie had nitpicked her poem, a subtle aggression that left Felicia feeling isolated, as Maisie now seemed to be actively avoiding her. Her friends rallied around her, advising her to ignore Maisie's petty behavior and not let the slight fester. Yet, the conversation took a sharper turn as another friend voiced a suspicion that had been brewing for some time. She pointed out that the shops and books Maisie frequently boasted about were not her own discoveries. Rather, they were treasures she had siphoned from Felicia. Felicia confirmed this observation with a heavy heart, admitting that she had remained silent to avoid conflict, deeming it unworthy of a public dispute. Nevertheless, the theft gnawed at her. Maisie possessed a talent for presenting these stolen interests as her own original finds, even claiming the very shop they had visited together as her personal discovery. The realization that her friends shared this unease brought a collective sense of validation to the group. The narrative shifted to recount Maisie's manipulative tactics. When confronted, Maisie would feign innocence, claiming she merely wanted to join in on the fun, twisting the narrative to make herself the victim of exclusion. She would lament about not being invited to picnics or seaside trips, rewriting history to suggest she heard plans from Felicia, effectively guilt-tripping everyone while simultaneously stealing the spotlight. This shameless behavior allowed Maisie to plunder the creative work of others without a shred of remorse. Her peers recognized this rot at her core, disgusted by her ability to act pitiful while engaging in intellectual theft. The discussion returned to the present, focusing on the specific injury of the poetry. Felicia revealed that Maisie had copied her poem as well. Rachel analyzed the structure of Maisie's work, noting a jarring inconsistency. Trite, amateurish verses were interspersed with oddly brilliant lines. It became clear that Maisie was a literary parasite, cobbling together fragments borrowed from various works to create a disjointed whole. The tragedy lay in the subtlety of the crime. To an outsider, the similarities might seem coincidental, mere echoes of inspiration. Proof of plagiarism remained elusive because Maisie altered minute details, masking the theft enough to evade definitive accusation while inflicting a deep, personal wound on the original author. Felicia and her friends understood that while the imitator might dismiss the act lightly, the violation was profound. It was sickening to watch someone else parade stolen creativity with unearned confidence. For Felicia, poetry was not just a hobby but an extension of her soul, springing from her unconscious self. The fear that her inner world would be pilfered again poisoned the act of creation. She confessed that she could no longer write for the sheer joy of it. The looming threat of theft made her despise the very craft she once loved. This violation robbed the artist of the pure delight of creating something beautiful, replacing it with a black haze of suspicion and resentment. Meanwhile, a different kind of desperation played out in the halls of the Earhart estate. Cyrus, Felicia's fiancé, stood alongside his father, bowing deeply in a humiliating display of supplication before Marquis Earhart. They were there to beg for financial aid yet again. The Marquis, looking down at them with cold scrutiny, questioned Cyrus's effort, challenging the notion that simply throwing money at their debts would solve the underlying rot in their family's finances. Cyrus, trembling, could only stammer that he was following his father's orders, his pride stripped away as he pleaded for a loan. He clenched his fist behind his back, a silent testament to his internal agony. The Marquis dismissed them, promising only to think about it, and Cyrus hurriedly excused himself, refusing the offer to see Felicia before leaving. He could not bear to face her in his current state. Later, Cyrus sought refuge in a tavern, drowning his shame in alcohol alongside his friends Toby and Neil. He lamented the exhaustion of his double life, pretending to be a kind fiancé to Felicia while secretly begging her father for money. He slammed his tankard onto the wooden table, cursing his situation. The marriage to Felicia was a necessity for his family's survival, a tether keeping them from financial ruin. Despite his pathetic circumstances, Cyrus clung to his vanity, reminding himself that he was the heir to a marquis skilled with a sword, and possessed looks that had once made him popular. He justified his humiliation as a temporary sacrifice for his family's debt. The conversation among the young men drifted to the marriage market and their careers in the Royal Knights. They noted that knights from poorer backgrounds often left the service around age 25 to take stable, lower-paying jobs as civil officials or guards. In contrast, those with wealthy inheritances remained in the order for honor, taking their time to find a bride. Toby and Neil, both second sons of viscounts, expressed their envy of Cyrus. They were desperate to secure a wealthy match before their time in the prestigious order ran out. They teased Cyrus, noting that he had it good as an eldest son with a capable fiancée like Felicia. However, the mood shifted when Cyrus revealed his intentions regarding social connections. His friends urged him to introduce them to ladies, perhaps Felicia's friends. The conversation inevitably turned to Maisie. Cyrus, in a drunken haze, suggested inviting Maisie next time, speculating she might bring friends. His friends reacted with skepticism and distaste, aware of Maisie's reputation and the friction between her and Felicia. They questioned if Maisie even had friends to bring. Despite knowing Felicia disliked her, Cyrus callously decided that if he had business with Maisie, likely seeing her as a useful tool or connection, he would engage with her regardless of his fiancée's feelings. He rationalized that Maisie, as the eldest daughter of House Goddard, still held social value. The narrative briefly flashed back to a party hosted by Barney, where Felicia's presence had irritated Cyrus's inner circle. Someone recalled the smug, self-righteous look on Felicia's face, admitting a dark satisfaction in seeing her distressed. This resentment simmered beneath the surface of their social interactions. Time moved forward to January 1st. The holiday brought no joy to Felicia. She sat alone, devastatingly composing herself after learning she had not made it past the preliminaries for the Royal Poetry Collection. She attributed the failure to her muddled state of mind, acknowledging that a hastily written poem stood no chance. She asked Carla to leave her be, retreating into her sorrow. The rejection compounded her anxiety. Her engagement was the only stability left, yet even that felt precarious. She felt the invisible hands of failure strangling her, a sensation of suffocation that threatened to snap her composure. She tried to convince herself she was blessed, but the pain of her poem and her promise falling apart was a heavy burden. The silence of the room was broken by the exuberant entry of Rosemary, Felicia's younger sister. Rosemary, dressed in a frilly gown, confessed to eavesdropping but quickly pivoted to her main objective, cheering up her sister. She demanded they go to Café Pumpkin Hat for tea. Rosemary's childish persistence and genuine concern chipped away at Felicia's wall of misery. Rosemary chided Felicia for pushing herself too hard, insisting that even writers needed breaks. With a resigned but grateful sigh, Felicia agreed, and Rosemary joyfully ordered Carla to prepare Felicia's dress. On that same cold day, in the Noble District, snow dusted the cobblestones as Cyrus waited outside. He shivered, his breath visible in the frigid air. His companions questioned his decision to invite Maisie, reminding him of Felicia's complaints. Cyrus dismissed their concerns with cold pragmatism, stating that his business with Maisie took precedence over Felicia's feelings. Suddenly, Prince Kevin and the young noble Barney approached. Kevin, the fifth-round winner of the court match, was being congratulated. Barney, cheeky and full of himself, challenged Kevin to a spar. As they engaged in a brief exchange, Cyrus critiqued Barney's stance as too wide. Kevin effortlessly handled the spar, earning praise, while Barney pouted, annoyed by the lecture on his technique. Cyrus looked on with disdain, irritated by Barney's cockiness despite his lower status and age. He internally scoffed at how Barney and Kevin used to stick to him, the Marquis's son, hoping for handouts, only to drift away when his lack of real authority became apparent. Back at the estate, Felicia emerged in a stunning dress, the very one she had worn when her engagement was first decided. Rosemary noted that it had been a while since she wore it. Felicia, looking at her reflection with renewed determination, declared she wanted to put some spirit back into her engagement. Rosemary cheered this decision, encouraging her sister to breathe and clear her head so she could write better poems in the future. The final moments of the chapter juxtaposed the two fiancés. Cyrus stood in the cold, waiting for another woman to secure his own selfish ends, while Felicia, bathed in the warmth of her sister's love, steeled herself to fight for her dignity and her art. The visual dichotomy hinted heavily that the time of parting for this ill-suited couple was drawing near. Felicia sat amidst the elegant ambience of a stylish café, savoring a blissful moment of solitude and flavor as she brought a cup of tea to her lips. She relished the opportunity to enjoy tea accompanied only by Carla, finding a distinct sense of refreshment in the simple fact that Maisie was not present to disrupt the atmosphere. Carla wiped the table diligently, prompting Felicia to reflect on the usual complications that arose when Maisie tagged along. Typically, Maisie would bring her own maid, forcing Carla, who lacked noble status, to wait outside the shop rather than join them. Her mind drifted to the persistent rumors and confrontations she faced at school, where peers constantly demanded to know why she harbored such hatred for Maisie. Although Felicia viewed her actions merely as avoidance, the general consensus among the student body branded her behavior as bullying. She struggled to articulate the root of her disdain, questioning herself inwardly about why the aversion ran so deep, especially since Maisie never openly displayed malice toward her. She considered that perhaps, in the past, she might have felt a sense of shame regarding these feelings, but her introspection was interrupted by the chime of the cafe door and a staff member welcoming new guests. A request for a table for 4 sliced through the air, drawing Felicia's attention to the new arrivals. She observed with sharp clarity that Maisie had arrived, not with friends of her own, but accompanied by Toby, Neil, and most crucially, Cyrus. The realization struck her that Maisie had not invited a single female friend, choosing instead to surround herself with Felicia's fiancé and his associates. Felicia listened intently as the group settled nearby, their conversation immediately drifting toward her. One of the group members dismissed Felicia's potential reaction, suggesting that exclusion was simply the kind of thing Felicia would do, while another expressed surprise at seeing Cyrus and Maisie together. The narrative being spun at the neighboring table painted a picture where nobody was friendly with Maisie, forcing her to team up with Rachel and others to allegedly gang up and exclude Maisie. A high-pitched, mocking laugh erupted from the group as they justified their gathering, claiming it was perfectly fine for them to have fun among themselves while never inviting Felicia. Felicia absorbed the cruel irony, understanding finally that they viewed her as the villain, yet she failed to comprehend why they had always directed such meanness toward her. Within the visual frame of her memory, Felicia recalled the false narratives Maisie spread, specifically the claim that Felicia had ordered her not to hang out with Maisie out of sheer jealousy. This fabrication incensed Felicia, for the reality was starkly different. Maisie had persistently followed her everywhere, barging into gatherings and social events where only Felicia had been invited, asking, "Can I come too?" with relentless intrusion. Maisie had even tagged along on dates with Felicia's cousin, who was not blood-related, every single time, yet what shocked Felicia more than Maisie's clinging was Cyrus's response to the situation. In the present, Cyrus defended his actions loudly to his companions, asserting that while he had agreed to keep some distance from Maisie, he had never explicitly promised not to see her. He rationalized that he saw no issue with meeting up with her cousin, regardless of his status as a fiancé, despite not explicitly communicating this loophole to Felicia. When a friend questioned whether it was wise to ignore Felicia's wishes and potentially anger her, Cyrus exploded with dismissal, shouting that he did not care in the slightest. Cyrus continued his tirade, labeling Felicia as selfish and citing an instance where she tried to stop him from associating with Barney, claiming she refused to listen to him. He argued that simply because Felicia had decided to hate Maisie, she believed she possessed the authority to order him around, a notion he found infuriating. Clenching his fist, he declared that a girl like her was unfit to be his fiancée, questioning why she sided with Barney instead of considering his feelings, a sentiment his friends quickly echoed in agreement. Rosemary, sitting with Felicia, whispered for her to endure the insults, identifying the noisy group as the Hamer family. Felicia reassured Rosemary that she was fine, maintaining her composure even as the weight of the situation pressed upon her. She understood the stakes. If the engagement failed, the Earhart family would suffer, as the social arrangement relied on their son's fiancée being from the Earhart lineage. However, the Hamer family continued their derision, laughing and openly stating that Felicia was unfit, despite society previously viewing the union as a perfect match. Cyrus justified his association with Maisie by claiming he only saw her because Felicia was such a lousy fiancée, asserting that Maisie thought about him far more than Felicia did. Maisie smiled, affirming she was on Cyrus's side, unlike Felicia. The gossip spiraled further as they insulted the Earhart family directly, calling the fiancée a disappointment and criticizing the alleged disgraceful scene Felicia was making, despite her silence. Felicia realized that because of Cyrus, her entire family was being insulted and mocked. Rosemary asked if she was okay, and Felicia initially clung to the mantra that she was fortunate and must endure. But as the realization settled that her endurance was failing to protect the Earhart family name, the very thing she had been suffering to preserve, her resolve shifted. She took a breath, her expression hardening as she decided on a definitive course of action. A memory surfaced in her mind, a vision of Kevin standing tall and looking cool, offering words dedicated to her about courage. Empowered by this recollection, Felicia acknowledged that she had been lying to herself, turning a blind eye to reality for too long. She resolved to believe what she saw with her own eyes rather than dismissing Cyrus's actions and Maisie's behavior as petty things not worth mentioning. She admitted that her refusal to believe the truth and her lack of courage had caused sorrow to appear on the faces of her family. With newfound clarity, Felicia comforted her attendants, apologizing to Rosemary and Carla for her lack of courage, assuring them that everything was all right now. She stood up, leaving her table to approach the source of the noise. Meanwhile, Cyrus continued his soliloquy, unaware of Felicia's approach. He laughed, claiming that if Kevin saw him, he would be a disgrace as a friend for looking so pathetic. He conceded that while Felicia was definitely beautiful, smart, and from a good family, he felt there was someone else who suited him better, someone who would respect him more. He expressed annoyance at Felicia's independence, mocking her for having her own opinions and demanding that she not mock him. Cyrus complained that Felicia always thought she was right and acted high and mighty, just as Felicia signaled a server to request a table for two nearby. The sound of her voice startled Cyrus, causing him to stammer as she stepped into his view. Felicia coldly finished his thought for him, suggesting that if he felt that way, he should go find someone like that. Cyrus panicked, stuttering her name in shock. Felicia stood firm, declaring that she understood perfectly how he thought now. Without hesitation, she announced her intention to speak with her father and have the engagement annulled. As Cyrus gaped in disbelief at the concept of annulment, Felicia finalized the interaction with a decisive command to break off the engagement immediately. The confrontation reaches its breaking point as Cyrus stammers, his composure fracturing under the weight of his own previous arrogance. He attempts to backpedal, claiming that his declaration of breaking the engagement was merely a jest, his voice wavering as he tries to salvage the situation. Felicia stands resolute, her gaze piercing through his excuses, reminding him that he had articulated those very words himself only moments prior. She refuses to let him rewrite the immediate past, asserting that she heard him clearly. Cyrus looks cornered, sweat forming on his brow as the reality of his blunder closes in on him. Felicia continues her verbal dismantle of his defense, pointing out that he had loudly mocked her and the Earhart family without a single thought for the consequences or his position as her fiancé. Cyrus struggles to form a coherent response, stumbling over his words, but Felicia cuts through his hesitation with absolute finality. She declares that she believes the evidence of her own eyes over his faltering explanations. The image of his betrayal burns in her mind, a memory of him intimate with another, dismissing Felicia entirely. She affirms that this visual proof is what she chooses to believe, turning her face away from him to signal the end of the discussion. With a sharp turn, Felicia addresses the room, her voice steady despite the emotional turmoil. She instructs them not to worry about her and to stay and enjoy their festivities, effectively dismissing herself from the toxic environment. She announces her intention to take a public carriage home, rejecting any offer of assistance from the Hamer family. Another guest, Carla, decides to leave as well, apologizing to Rosemary for departing early despite the invitation, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. Felicia walks away, leaving the tension behind her. Inside, the atmosphere curdles as bystanders whisper about the scene they just witnessed. Observers note that Cyrus is panicking, realizing that if the engagement is truly broken, the Hamer family will be the ones to suffer the political fallout. Felicia, exiting the hall, understands that Cyrus's pride acts as a barrier, preventing him from offering a genuine apology. She feels the eyes of the crowd on her, treating her as if she were something contagious to be avoided. She pushes through the heavy doors, acknowledging that an apology at this stage would be futile regardless. She steps out into the night, leaving the suffocating social circle behind. The moment the heavy doors seal shut behind her, the biting cold of the winter night seizes her. A sudden, horrifying realization strikes her. In her haste to make a dignified exit, she forgot her cloak. She visualizes herself freezing, transforming into a literal snowman, and contemplates turning back to retrieve it. However, her pride intervenes immediately. She imagines the humiliation of re-entering the party she just stormed out of. She resolves that she cannot do something so pathetic, preferring the cold to the loss of dignity. She attempts to laugh off the absurdity of her situation, but the laughter comes out strained and shivering. The weather proves far worse than she anticipated. Heavy snow falls in thick sheets, blanketing the streets and silencing the city. She scans the road for a public carriage, but the severe weather has halted all transport services. She laments her luck, unable to believe the weather deteriorated so rapidly. Standing alone in the freezing wind, she chastises herself for her impulsiveness. She admits that acting on impulse never leads to a positive outcome, realizing she rushed out with nothing but a book, leaving her protection against the elements behind. She calls herself an idiot, her breath forming clouds in the frigid air as she sighs deeply. Despite the physical cold gnawing at her bones, a strange sense of clarity washes over her. She acknowledges that knowing Cyrus does not love her brings her no pain. She realizes she is not hurt at all by this revelation. Previously, she believed the lack of affection mattered, but now she sees the truth clearly. If he views her merely as a tool for his family's pleasure or a fortunate match for a noble's daughter, the relationship is devoid of meaning. She decides firmly that she does not care about any of those political or social expectations anymore. The snow continues to swirl around her, catching in her hair and eyelashes. She stands resolute in the storm, her cheeks flushed from the cold but her expression calm. She affirms to herself that Cyrus truly does not matter to her existence. The realization liberates her, and she repeats the sentiment internally, solidifying her emotional detachment from him. Suddenly, a presence interrupts her solitude. She notices a figure approaching through the veil of snow. A man steps into her view, causing her to startle. She recognizes him immediately despite the snow. It is Kevin. She demands to know what he is doing there, surprised by his sudden appearance. Kevin does not waste time with explanations. He immediately acts to shield her from the freezing temperature. He removes his own outer layer and drapes it over her. He urges her to hurry and wear it, his voice commanding yet concerned. He ignores her weak protestations, insisting that she just do as he says. Kevin explains his presence while adjusting the garment around her. He reveals that Barney invited him, suggesting they sneak off to a good place he knew. To avoid recognition, Kevin had disguised himself by wrapping a scarf around his face. As he secures the warm clothing around her, he pieces together the timeline. He realizes that she was at the cafe earlier, which explains why he sensed her presence there. Felicia is overcome with embarrassment and vulnerability. She fears that he saw her in what she considers a pathetic mess. The weight of her recent failures crashes down on her, not just the engagement, but the fact that she failed the Royal Poetry Contest, an endeavor Kevin had supported her in. The shame of him seeing her broken and failing burns brighter than the cold. Tears well up in her eyes as she struggles with the fact that she hasn't even told him about the failure yet. Kevin senses her distress and speaks gently to calm her. He reminds her of what he told her before, that it is okay. He reaffirms his loyalty, stating unequivocally that he is on her side. He promises that he will always be her ally, his words cutting through her anxiety. Tears spill from her eyes, freezing on her cheeks as his kindness overwhelms her defenses. Kevin looks at her with intense concern, calling her name. Felicia turns away, apologizing through her tears. She confesses her fear, not for herself, but for her family. She was terrified that because of her actions regarding Cyrus, the Earhart family name would suffer. She believed her fault in the relationship would ruin the engagement and bring shame upon her house. She continues her confession, clutching the item he gave her. She explains that when the Earhart name was mocked, she couldn't simply stay quiet and accept the insult. She mentions the Edelweiss, a symbol of courage connected to the bookmark he gave her. She reveals that it was the words Kevin gave her in the past that allowed her to stand her ground. She was able to stand there without shaking because he had turned those words into a bookmark for her, providing a physical anchor for her bravery. She acknowledges the complexity of the situation. She knows that breaking the engagement is a massive event, and admits she doesn't know everything that happened from his perspective. She recognizes that it must have taken courage for him to support her. She expresses that if the Edelweiss was by her side, she is glad. Felicia's mind races with hypotheticals. She wonders if she had been a better person, or kinder to Cyrus, perhaps the engagement could have been salvaged. She admits that the failure isn't solely Cyrus's fault. However, she reaches a crucial conclusion. She could not change herself simply to get along with Cyrus or Maisie. She refuses to alter her fundamental self to fit Cyrus's mold. She turns to Kevin, thanking him sincerely. She tells him that because of him, she can stay true to herself. Regaining her composure, Felicia shifts into a tactical mindset. She realizes she has no time to waste crying. She deduces that she must inform her father immediately before Cyrus has a chance to take back his words or spin the story. She anticipates that the things Cyrus shouted will likely spread as rumors, potentially causing a scandal. A bad reputation could mean that a future engagement becomes impossible, and she needs to manage the fallout instantly. Suddenly, a noise interrupts them. Kevin hears a rattle nearby and glances toward the sound. He dismisses it, telling Felicia it is nothing and she doesn't need to worry about it. He notes that the carriage he called has arrived. He reassures her that everything is okay and tells her they can talk another time. Felicia tries to speak, feeling the urgency to tell him something important, but he cuts her off gently, prioritizing her safety. Kevin instructs the driver to take her to the Earhart estate immediately. He turns to Felicia, acknowledging her immediate duty. She needs to speak to Marky Earhart right now. He urges her to get into the carriage. Felicia attempts to return his cloak, not wanting to leave him in the cold, but he stops her. He insists she keep it, stating that if she catches a cold, it would trouble him. He reaffirms that he will be by her side and tells her to go. Felicia complies, stepping into the carriage. As she settles in, Kevin leans in and wraps a scarf around her neck, ensuring she is completely bundled against the freezing air. He winds it carefully, creating a cocoon of warmth around her. He makes her promise not to catch a cold, and she extracts the same promise from him. With a final, "Yeah, I promise," he sends her off. As the carriage pulls away, Felicia calls out her thanks to Kevin, vowing to repay him someday. Sitting in the moving carriage, she realizes she is no longer trembling. Wrapped in his cloak and scarf, she feels a profound sense of warmth that penetrates the winter chill. The kindness he showed her acts as a shield, and she travels home, wrapped up in his care, ready to face her father. The story pauses here, promising a continuation of this warm determination. Back at the banquet hall, the atmosphere curdles into chaos as Cyrus realizes the magnitude of his error. He mutters frantically to himself that things have taken a disastrous turn, his internal monologue spiraling into a repetitive chant of panic. He attempts to shift the burden of guilt, convincing himself that Felicia bears fault in this debacle as well, though he acknowledges he must chase after her immediately. His thoughts race back to the moments prior, blaming Maisie for dragging things out and preventing his immediate pursuit. He rationalizes his delay by telling himself that leaving Maisie behind would have been socially unacceptable, and that he only managed to escape because Toby and the others urged her to leave. He constructs a defensive narrative where he was physically unable to leave his seat because of her insistence, using this to bolster his fragile resolve as he dashes out of the venue. Bystanders cheer him on, oblivious to the toxicity of his motivations, telling him to hang in there. Cyrus forces his body to move faster, desperate to make it in time to salvage his future. His breath comes in ragged gasps, his lungs burning with the exertion as he complains about the heat and his inability to breathe. Finally, the looming structure of the Earhart estate comes into view, and he announces his arrival to the empty air, exhausted but relieved. He spots Felicia outside the mansion and exhales, grateful that he caught her before she disappeared inside. He attempts to compose himself, noting the cooling effect of the night air, and immediately begins to gaslight himself and her, questioning if she is seriously taking the breakup to heart. He calculates his next move with cold pragmatism, realizing that he must persuade Felicia right here and now, or the Hamer family faces total ruin. Confronting her, Cyrus attempts to rewrite reality, claiming that he obviously does not want to break off the engagement. Felicia, wrapped in the cloak Kevin gave her, challenges this assertion with a skeptical query. Cyrus doubles down, insisting he hasn't considered ending it in the slightest, but Felicia cuts through his defenses by bringing up the third party in their relationship. She points out that Maisie is the one who truly occupies his thoughts. Felicia adopts a self-deprecating tone, echoing the insults hurled at her previously, stating that she is an inadequate fiancée who finally speaks her mind. She suggests that there are plenty of people more suitable for him than she is. Cyrus recoils, begging her to stop saying such cruel things, failing to see the irony. Felicia stands her ground, clarifying that she is merely repeating his own words back to him. She asserts that she had no intention of being cruel, but simply acted as a mirror to his behavior. Desperate, Cyrus plays his final card, declaring that the one he loves is Felicia, not Maisie. The tension is interrupted by the arrival of Alfred, the Earhart family butler, who demands to know what is transpiring in front of the entrance. He immediately notices Felicia's condition and expresses concern, urging her to come inside to her room. Cyrus interjects, commanding Felicia to wait and trying to halt her retreat. Alfred recognizes the intruder, but Cyrus dismisses the servant with contempt. Cyrus shouts that their conversation isn't over yet and orders Alfred not to interfere, his panic mounting. He realizes with dread that if Felicia enters the mansion, his opportunity to manipulate the situation vanishes, and it will all be over. Alfred, maintaining his professional composure despite Cyrus's aggression, scolds the young man for speaking so rudely. He advises Cyrus to calm down, noting that he has lost his cool and cannot think straight. Cyrus tries to insist on talking right now, outside. Alfred's demeanor shifts to disbelief. He points out that Lady Felicia is soaked and freezing, yet Cyrus prioritizes his own need to talk over her physical well-being. He asks if Cyrus is blind to her suffering. Alfred questions the validity of Cyrus's status as a fiancé, observing that he only thinks about his own convenience. The doors open further to reveal mangarecapped, Felicia's father, who steps out demanding to know if something is wrong. He is immediately shocked by his daughter's appearance, exclaiming that she is soaked to the bone. Alfred attempts to explain the situation formally, but Cyrus tries to interject, sweating profusely as he addresses the Marquis, claiming it isn't what he thinks. Cyrus attempts to initiate a discussion, stating he has something to discuss. The Marquis ignores Cyrus's pleas entirely. He issues a cold, final decree. He cannot hear Cyrus out today. He orders the young man to come back another day, effectively banishing him from the premises. Cyrus stands stunned, uttering a weak confirmation as the power dynamic shifts completely. The Marquis turns his attention solely to his daughter, stating that they must get her warmed up first and will talk afterward. He guides Felicia inside, leaving Cyrus stranded on the doorstep. As the heavy doors creak shut, the gap closes on Cyrus's desperate face, followed by the definitive thud of the lock engaging. Safe inside the warm interior of the estate, Felicia sits quietly while her father asks if she has calmed down. With a resolved expression, she addresses him formally, stating her desire to call off her engagement with Cyrus. The Marquis asks what follows that decision, noting that such a declaration is quite sudden. He assumes she must have a reason and invites her to share it. Felicia acknowledges her request is selfish, but her father presses gently, asking specifically what it is about Cyrus that she dislikes. Felicia struggles to articulate her feelings, admitting she isn't confident she can explain it well as the words fail her. The Marquis patiently asks why she feels that way. She begins by admitting that she doesn't think Cyrus is the only one at fault, nor does she actively dislike him in a traditional sense. Instead, she describes a feeling of apathy, realizing that she has started to feel like none of it matters anymore. She reflects on the social insults she endured, recalling how she was called brazen for a baron's daughter and labeled a plain girl. She explains that seeing the way Cyrus looked down on people made her feel deeply uncomfortable. She worries that speaking up now sounds like simple badmouthing, and admits she might be at fault for not speaking up properly at the time. The Marquis listens intently, absorbing her confession. The Marquis probes further, asking why she never called Cyrus out on his behavior. Felicia admits she knew that if she pointed it out, he would only get moody, so she remained silent to keep the peace. She then highlights the double standard in their relationship. She notes that while there were male friends in her circle, Cyrus would go out without her, his fiancée. She reveals that today at the cafe, Cyrus arrived with Maisie. Prompted for more details, Felicia recounts how Cyrus happily agreed with Maisie, and together they mocked her. She adds that Cyrus claimed he hates Barney, and therefore because Felicia gets along with Barney, she is unfit to be his fiancée. The Marquis asks for an example of the behavior she despises. Felicia finally voices the core of her frustration. She hates Maisie. She explains that Maisie does things normal people wouldn't do without a care, and while she can't explain it perfectly, the hatred is visceral. The dam breaks within Felicia. All the thoughtless actions she had endured up until now, everything she had been brooding over, comes pouring out uncontrollably. Flashbacks of Maisie's feigned innocence and Cyrus's neglect flood her mind as she speaks. She admits she couldn't stop the flow of grievances, and her father listens quietly to it all. Felicia soaks her feet in a basin of warm water, the physical warmth contrasting with the pain of her memories. She admits that the insults did hurt. The Marquis validates her pain, asking gently if, despite them seeming trivial to others, they really hurt her. Felicia confirms this, realizing that all the things she couldn't put into words one by one had accumulated to cause her genuine pain and discomfort. She apologizes again, thinking her grievances might seem trivial to everyone else. She continues to detail the hypocrisy she witnessed. She explains that Maisie kept saying over and over that she wanted to go to Barney's family parties too. When Felicia told her there was nothing she could do about it, Maisie, who wasn't allowed to go from the start, teamed up with Cyrus to criticize Felicia for going. Maisie would declare, "I'd never go to such a party," contradicting her own previous desires. Felicia analyzes Maisie's character, wondering if gossip makes people feel more united. She realized that Maisie would always smile at whoever she was with and join them in bad-mouthing the other side. Felicia asserts her own moral stance, stating that if it were her, she wouldn't pretend to get along and wouldn't go to those parties either. She saw Maisie engage in this two-faced behavior often. She describes how Maisie, who hates Barney, teamed up with Cyrus to blame Felicia for being close to him. She recalls Maisie asking, "Felicia, Cyrus isn't important to you, is he?" and notes that Maisie looked truly delighted as she made the accusation. This occurred even though Maisie herself had repeatedly expressed a desire to attend the parties. Felicia concludes that while it might be selfish of her, she hates Maisie's lack of common sense and vulgarity. The Marquis summarizes the situation. Felicia hates Maisie's vulgarity, while Cyrus believed that if Felicia could get along with Barney, it should be fine for him to get along with Maisie. The Marquis states plainly that he doesn't think this situation can be helped. Hearing this validation, Felicia feels a sudden weight lift from her shoulders. The Marquis explains that while looking only at the facts might make Felicia seem selfish, in reality, they are both the same in their stubbornness. He concludes that, in short, they simply don't get along. He advises her that there is no need to force herself to deal with Maisie. Felicia internalizes this relief, realizing she doesn't have to deal with Maisie anymore. The Marquis connects the dots regarding the family's reputation. He realizes that because of this toxic dynamic, the Earhart family ended up being laughed at by everyone, including the Hamer family. Felicia adds that at the cafe, Cyrus was loudly mocking her together with Maisie. The Marquis sees the truth clearly now. Cyrus and Maisie truly get along well. He apologizes to his daughter for what she endured. With a calm, authoritative demeanor, the Marquis announces his decision. He states that since they have finally settled this engagement over such matters, he wishes to call it off entirely. He declares that in that case, they should let Cyrus be with Maisie instead. He promises to personally inform the Hamer family of the annulment. Felicia is stunned by the decisiveness of his action. The Marquis explains his reasoning further. He posits that whether one is right or wrong doesn't really matter. He acknowledges that, as Felicia herself understands, it might not be fair to put all the blame solely on Cyrus. However, the fundamental issue is that Felicia and the Hamers simply don't see things the same way. He asserts that this incompatibility is enough of a reason to end it. Felicia, wrapped in a blanket, asks in disbelief if they can really call off an engagement for that reason. Her father smiles, noting that things are about to get busy, signaling the beginning of the end for the union.